we were
Oh,
face to face, and he's telling me, and, and he's acting like I don't understand. He goes, rolling in it, and I'm still like aghast. I don't know what to say, and he goes, in shit.
and shit.
So, and
Yeah,
I go,
I got
dude,
it.
I get it.
Yeah, I wonder why she wasn't popular in school. She is a little detached.
Well, I never got to know her that well, and
Oh,
I'm
she was
sure he
busy
didn't
working
either.
co-op, all right. My God.
And I know neither one of
How
us
do you
got to
bring
know.
that up to another? I'd like to on you.
Well,
And then somebody says, okay. Oh,
well, you better make sure you understood the request.
Hello and welcome back to Hindsight is 50/50. I'm the host J-Rod with my co-host, the ORG old retired guy. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm in recovery mode. We the a cold is still. I'm on the tail end of it. Your mom's kind of in the heart of it, which all
Always.
started during last week's ice storm. And what was it? Last Wednesday night. Today's Thursday, the 2nd. And this was last Wednesday evening. There was all this basically snowmageddon weather forecast that, we were all going to die.
Yeah.
And because it was ice more than it was snow. And obviously with ice comes the power outages, and they came. So I want to say last Wednesday at 7:40, we lost power. Well, I have a generator that, I bought that my dad had, and I've used it and I've fired it up before. But I had never had to use it functionally. I did test it. And I tested it briefly. That was in the summer, and it worked. But when I tested it, I had to put a new cord on it, a new cord end. And there's these heavy duty 4-pronged electrical cords.
Like a
not
house
a
plug or
I'm
a
not
motorhome plug.
I'm not an electrician, but it kind of looks like the plug that you plug either a dryer or a range into. It's real heavy duty. That
Yeah.
goes from the generator to the transfer station. So in the freezing rain, I wheel the generator out. I start it up. It fires right up. I plug in the cord. I go in and hit the switches on the transfer panel. We got nothing.
But
and
that's
I'm
a pretty
and
good
I'm
generator, huh?
and I'm soaked. And the generator's running and it's doing its job, but we got
It,
nothing.
it generated a great big pissed off man is what a generator is.
Well, in a cold, wet one. So that
And
night
an
we
angry
made.
wife.
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
not
You know what's
pleased.
better than being cold and wet? Having your wife pissed. Nice. Yay, power outage.
So anyway, we used the fireplace and we used those little pull-up lanterns that your mom has and candles. And we made it through the night stoking the fire, but that meant, you got to stay up all night because about every hour you got to tend that fire in the fireplace.
Right.
And we kept it about 62. Well, I knew I was already in the shit house. and and I also knew that it must have been something I did with that cord, that because I tested it once and it did work. So I assumed it would work. Well, then when I was unplugging it, something didn't feel right. It felt, the end felt kind of
Had a
loose.
loose connection or something, yeah.
I took it apart, and again, it's great big heavy wires, but in the daylight, so I wait till it's daylight so I can see on Thursday morning. And I fixed the cord and plugged it in, and by God, it all worked. So we had when they hooked up this transfer panel, I just said, I want the necessities. We have well water, so we got to have the well. I said, I want heat, so we had the furnace. And then basically the downstairs, we had full function except for the range. Because that's another like a 240 or whatever. It's the
But
heavy
could you
duty.
use the oven?
No, because
Okay.
ours is it's electric range, so you
I
couldn't use
just
the.
didn't know if like by range, if you meant just the stovetop or not.
No, we couldn't use the oven or the stovetop, but we could use the microwave. And we had water, but we didn't have hot water. And we have a big hot water heater, and that hot water lasted till about Thursday night. If you were frugal with it, which we were, because we
How do
knew
you not have hot water?
again, that's another heavy duty hookup for the hot water heater. So you can only have so many things attached to this transfer panel. And when you take out the well, which is heavy duty, and the furnace, which is heavy duty, you can't add those two other things with the size generator I have. And
I guess I never thought of it taking that much power because I thought it was like a gas and pilot light.
Me either. Well, our everything in our house is electric. The hot water heater, the range.
Oh,
everything.
no shit.
Yeah. So that's why we didn't have hot
Well,
water.
I just live in an old house. Sorry.
We live, yeah.
I'm still fucking around with pilot lights every time the power goes out. That little tainted window.
We had satellite and TV downstairs. Like everything worked.
Yeah.
Everything worked except the lights in the guest bathroom. Now again, you don't have washer and dryer because those are both heavy duty and both electric. So we couldn't do wash. We couldn't, you had to do the military bathing where you heat up a thing of water.
Yeah. I mean, but I was actually going to ask you, can you manually fill up your water heater? Could you boil water and put it in there?
Well, yeah, we could. That would be a pretty tedious process, but you could. But so what we did, I mean, we got by. You just did the helmet baths.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I mean,
but so
there's nothing wrong with that.
So here's my frustration about that. So, we don't have anything to bitch about, right? I mean, we had the necessary things. And again, hot water's that's an inconvenience, but we've navigated through that. Not having the range or the stovetop, excuse me. That was but we had the microwave and we had the air fryer and
you
the
got
toast.
it pretty good. I mean, I remember as a kid, it's like power went out. Well, I guess we're throwing cards in a hat in the dark because you didn't know when it was going to come back in the country. So I mean, having a little bit of inconvenience, I think you guys are doing pretty friggin' good.
And it was a good thing, Jared, because it didn't come back till Sunday night.
Oof.
So I mean, we're without power from Wednesday night till Sunday night. Now again, we're on generator power, which, by the way, burned about 10 gallons of gas a day. So I was having to go in and fill up my gas cans every day. And then
you didn't want to get some of that Grandpa's Scully gas.
No,
didn't want to destroy the generator.
No. So yeah, I didn't want to destroy it with 10-year-old gasoline. But so and it was funny because you don't want that generator. You don't want to lose power. Well, the generator stops, you lose power again. And then you got to go through the process of starting up the generator and hitting all the switches and firing everything back up again. Which isn't bad, but it's, up and down the stairs and in and out. So one time the generator I went out there and I go, man, I better go check that. It was right. I don't know how it was running because I could see the bottom of the tank. And I had the gas, so I filled it up right away. But, every 5-6 hours I got after, it was 4 full days that we were without power. So after a couple days, I got in a routine where, at noon I'd check it, at 6 o'clock I'd fill it. And then, sometime in the night I'd fill it, sometime around midnight. And then I'd be good till 10, 11, noon the next day. But so we had a lot better than a lot of people because, man, and like you said, we didn't have that generator when you were still at home, you
Right.
know. But so that was a big boost.
That's a
And when
win.
my
Yeah.
my biggest frustration was, and you'll appreciate this, is that Consumers Energy, which is our power provider, and they've been really good. We've lived here 22 years. That's the longest power outage we've had. And they've been few and far between. I remember one that was a couple of days, but other than that, we're talking hours and the power's back on, and it doesn't happen often. But everybody's doing everything electronically. We still had, we had internet, because we had power downstairs. We still had internet. So you go on their website, and on the first day, it says, you isolate your house, and they've got maps, and then they've got a time estimate. Well, on the first day, it says your power will be back on it Friday at
Yeah.
5:15
Next
a.m.
fucking month.
This was Jared. This was on Wednesday night, so I'm thinking, okay, that's a day and a half. All we got to do is make it through Thursday. We wake up Friday, the power's back on. Everything will be good.
No shot.
By Friday morning, you know, it just said your power's on the internet, and it's like the hell it is.
Right. Yeah, I don't know
And
the difference. Sorry.
and then and then after when I checked it later on in the morning, it's like it says, it gives you these little maps that show areas that are being worked on. And initially, it showed our area, which is a very tiny area serving less than 50 people. And it showed that area being worked on Thursday. It showed that. And so it's supposed to be but done by Friday morning. Well, by Friday at 11 o'clock, that line showing it was being worked on is no longer there. And it says we have power. So then I'm using the tools on their website to say, no, we don't have power. I talked to the neighbor, one of the neighbors, and Kim Hone, and she was going through the same thing, saying, no, we don't have power. So then we get a new estimate, and it says Monday at noon. Well, that's a little bit deflating when you feel like you don't exist, right?
Well,
It's like,
but because the infrastructure, you guys aren't on a loop, right? So even if they fixed your power, but the guy past you doesn't have power, they got to shut all you down, right? Because you're on one system.
I, you're probably right, Jared. I'm not sure how it works, but at any rate, and I always say when they give these estimates, they intentionally give them longer
Oh,
because,
that's they do that up here, and it'll be like
well, yeah,
they'll tell you 3 hours, and then 3 hours goes by, and they're like, "It's gonna be next week, and tomorrow the power's on." But they want to be the
exactly. And
hero
then
tomorrow.
they look like heroes, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
understand that logic. I do. I
yeah.
get it. I get why they do that.
I'll be there
But
sometime between 8 a.m. Monday and 4 p.m. Friday.
there were things
All right.
that you find are very interesting. Just really interesting. Like, I don't know, to a lot of people, they would consider where we live to be remote. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think to most people.
Yeah, we're not remote like the people that live in the Arctic Circle or,
But you're remote, like you had to plant grass in your yard because it was a hayfield.
yeah, we're remote.
So
I
I
mean,
mean, it's remote.
I can see houses from our house, but you know,
Yeah, but there's more manure spreaders than there is houses.
well, that's fair, and a lot more tractors. So anyway, we're remote, but it's really one of the things that I love about being out here is that it's so quiet. Because it is. I mean, you can go outside and sit on our deck, and you and I have done it many times, and Melissa and the kids and everybody, and it's quiet. I mean,
You fall asleep out there. Yeah.
you might hear a tractor running in the distance. if our neighbor's got one of those bobcats, if he's got his bobcat out doing work, you might hear his backup alarm. But by and
Yeah, you
large,
hear the neighborhood tinkering.
yeah, and it's very, very quiet. Well, during this power outage, you've got me with a generator. You've got the neighbors to the west with a generator. You've got the neighbors to the south with a generator, the Bondies. The Hones to the west, the Bondies to the south. And Phil Malley, our neighbor to the east, he's in Florida. But he's got one of those Generac things that kicks on automatically and it runs off propane. So off of his propane tank. So I mean, that switch is all set up. It kicks on automatically. When the power comes back on, it kicks off automatically.
Yeah, he's on a different level for sure.
So, but you'd walk outside in this normally quiet circumstance, and you'd hear this brown noise of all these generators.
Just a symphony of
Yeah, yeah. And
who's got the high pitch? Who's got the low pitch?
Phil, it was really kind of cool on Thursday morning, and Phil's down in Florida. They have a home down there, and he's been down there for a few weeks. And he texted me, and he said, "I heard you guys had an ice storm." And I go, "Yeah, it was bad. They said it was going to be between a quarter and a half an inch. I think it was a half an inch." Well, that didn't sound like a lot, but when you put that on a power line and then put it on a span of several hundred feet,
that's a lot of weight.
That's a lot of weight. We lost a lot of tree limbs. Lot of tree. Our road was ridiculously blocked. Again, 3 neighbors, 3 tractors are down there for 2 or 3 hours getting the road cleared. But Phil texts me and he says, "I hear you had an ice storm." And I go, "Oh yeah." And I said, "They say power will be back by Friday." This was when I was still under the illusion that we were going to get power back in a day and a half. And he goes, "If you guys need a and you know their house, they have a beautiful home. It's 10, 12 years old. They have a beautiful brick home. It's very nice." And he says to me, he goes, "Well, if you guys need a warm place to stay, I'll give you the code to my house." And I just thought that was amazing that he would offer that. Now, we didn't. I mean, we had warmth. We just didn't have hot water.
But I mean, that's more than the neighborly thing to do. And it's funny because he looks like this big stern guy, but he's been nothing but a sweetheart to me. He's always been nice, always been willing to help with a helping hand. It's just,
loves you boys, always speaks highly of all of you. He's lifted weights with all of you.
Yeah.
You know, at the fitness center. And he says, "But if you get a chance," he goes, "check the level in my propane tank." And so that day I got out because as fast as it came, it got up to like 50 the next day and the ice was gone by the end of the day. And then everything's just wet. And so
I would have texted him back and I would have been like, "I'm good staying at home. We got a fireplace, but I could use a warm shower."
Well, I wasn't going to go there, but I just thought it was very nice of him to ask. And so I went down and checked his propane tank and reported back. He was at 68%. Well, the next day I saw, and 68% would have lasted him probably another 3 weeks. But the next day I saw a propane truck coming down the road and it filled up his propane tank. But, you know, and it's that whole thing. You live down here and we're on this dead end road that's 3/4 of a mile long. There's like, I've counted them. I think in total there's 10 houses. There's only like 1, 2, 3, 4 that I can see out of the 10, with us being one of the 10. But yet, when the road, you know, because it's a private road, we have no, you know, government municipality taking care of our road. Private road, 3 guys with 3 tractors and 3 loader buckets and 3 chainsaws. And they go down our road and it's like, boom, boom, boom. Everybody who lives here can get out. And it's like, nobody asks for any money. I mean, your mom and I are going to do something, particularly for Greg, because he's always involved. But Leroy was helping him. The new neighbor, Lance, was helping him.
I figured that was part of the reason you wanted to get a tractor. So
I
you
want
could
to
get in with
help.
the road crew,
Absolutely, I want to help, and
get a little pull behind grader.
that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I if I that's why I want to get the motorcycles out of here. If I can get the motorcycles out of the basement, that'll allow me some more indoor storage for my toys. That'll make me room for a tractor, and
You
that's
know,
what I want to do.
all this talk about generators, I'm surprised especially like after your guys' house burned down and it's recently rebuilt. I mean, I know it's been a few years, but it's not like an old house by any means. I'm surprised you guys don't have one of the battery packs, but just in general, more homes out in the country don't have these installed battery panels, which are like part of a wall. And you're some are in the basement. I think some people put them in the garage if they don't have a basement, but it will power the whole house for like 2 weeks, and it charges the rest of the year off of a solar panel that's either part of your house outside or connected somewhere in your yard. And it's like out in the country. You guys got so much space. I'm surprised those aren't more common. I know that they can be expensive because you're looking at probably 10 grand, but you're looking at 10 grand for the rest of your life of your house.
Phil, the neighbor to the east, the guy who offered us the house, and the Bondis who live on the hill that are just the best neighbors you could have, and he's the guy who does the bulk of the stuff to the road with his tractor. They both have freestanding solar panels, great big ones. You've seen Mally's.
Yes.
You can see that from our deck. Bondi's have the same thing. You know how much wind we get. I mean, we get wind. It's like being on the prairie. We get so much
You
wind.
guys could put a little mini turbine out there.
That's where I'm headed with a battery bank of a residential wind turbine, and a small one, and you can even make them look like an old fashioned windmill, kinda, sorta.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it doesn't have to generate a whole lot because you're charging that battery all year round. It's not
And
like it has to be
yes,
ready tomorrow because I installed it today. It's that thing's going to be constantly moving,
I lost
especially in your cold winters when we get those bad wind drifts and
I lost two healthy trees last year to wind. And you know how much wind we get. We have a breeze here almost all the time. And so I've started looking into the residential wind turbine thing, and I don't want to get something that's obtrusive and looks like,
no, nothing
the
gaudy, but like an
Jetsons.
old farm
Yes,
windmill.
and you can actually get them that look like that. That
Yeah.
look like an old farm windmill that powered a pump. But you could hook it up to battery banks, which then, like you said, you keep those battery banks charged, and depending on how many battery banks you have, and that's the expensive part. See, Phil, I don't know. I know that Phil likes his solar panel, and Greg, I think they like it too. And I want to say they were 20K to get but those are almost as big as a billboard
And
now.
they're
They're
freestanding. It's not part
yes,
of their roof or anything
yes,
else.
yeah.
It's like
But
those things are solidified on something that can withstand that wind out in the open.
you're thinking about it just gets you thinking about alternative energy sources. One of the things I know I had asked you about what you did with the boys yesterday. And before you get into that, I wanted to share one story about something that happened here.
Okay.
That is just a nature thing that as I get older, I appreciate these things more and more. So we have hawks out here, like red-tailed hawks are pretty common, and it's funny to watch them hunt in the fields. But and we also have crows. And crows, I think crows are beautiful. I do. They're jet black. The ones here are anyway. They're jet black. They're big. And you'll see two or three out in the yard picking every now and then. And you see them year round. I don't know that they migrate, but I don't think they do, because I literally see crows here pretty much all the time. Not a flock, but a few. So Monday, it's a dreary day. Your mom's this past Monday, your mom's in town running errands for her folks. She had to take her dad to a doctor's appointment. I'm walking by the doors to the deck, and it's raining. And there's this big bird out there that I can see through the spindles in the deck rail. And it's out there probably 40, 50 feet off the edge of the deck in the backyard. And I thought, that's a crow, but man, a crow out picking in the rain? You just don't see that, you know? So rather than scare it, I grabbed my glasses, my binoculars. I put the glasses on it. It wasn't a crow. It was a red-tailed hawk. Landed in our yard. And I'm watching him through the binoculars. And he's there for like more than a minute. And I could see him, he's reaching down at something. I know he's got something. He took off. He had this giant fat ground mole.
That's awesome.
But again, these are, you know, and as I don't know, as you get older, I used to, you know, years ago I hunted everything that crawled or walked, you know, and I haven't hunted in a long time. But the older I get, the more I appreciate nature. And I mean, you know, we have deer that practically come up to the house.
Yeah.
And you know, and see in different critters. I mean, there's woodchucks, and we've seen fox here. I let Max out to go to the bathroom the other night, and there was coyotes howling, and he wouldn't leave the porch.
That's
And I don't
probably a
blame
good
him.
idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't blame him. But
Then the pack
that
size they
was
can get in. That's sketchy.
yeah, but you know, that again, just an interesting thing to see. And I'm thinking, in the rain, this big bird, and when you get close to him, a hawk is a pretty big bird. They got a pretty good wingspan.
Oh yeah.
Is in our backyard, crouched on the ground, and when he got up and flew away, he could barely get off the ground. That mole was so big.
That's a chunk, man. He probably saved your lawn quite a
But
bit.
so anyway, that nature story leading into where you and Melissa took the boys yesterday.
Yeah, so we went to downtown Detroit, and there is a DNR community exhibit center or community center. I'm not sure exactly how they word it, but essentially the DNR and some of their employees have a facility in which they teach you all about Michigan, everything outdoorsy about Michigan that um, would be interesting to learn, like inside of a hands-on museum. And so you go through, and the first thing's just about the type of animals that live here, and bonfires and all that stuff. And then there's like a cabin exhibit, so the little kids get to go play in bunk beds in a small wooden cabin as if you're going to stay up on the Great Lakes. Then after that, you move on and go into underwater Michigan. So you're going through the life underneath or inside of the Great Lakes. And so there's all the fish that are in there, the sea lamprey, mussels that come in from the boats through shipping, all of that stuff that you can see, and they're alive in tanks. And it's not just informative, but it's really cool, and the kids enjoy it. And then, you know, they show you animals that are, whether it be birds or whether it be burrowing animals that dig, or an otter dam, whatever the case is. And they have all these cool exhibits for you to go through. And then this whole thing is 3 stories. So when you go upstairs, it just kind of keeps expanding and becoming more involved. So there was an archery range that unfortunately was closed, so we didn't get to check it out. But there was teaching kids about firearms, and there was plastic plastic rifles for a video game, but for all intents and purposes, they were a Ruger 1022. However, they obviously did not fire, but you did squeeze the trigger. It was a real trigger, and you aimed it at a screen which tracked your aim, and you were killing squirrels and different critters for like a high score. And it was just teaching you about hunting and all this stuff. And as we went on, there was a couple really, really cool exhibits. And one of them, I believe I told you about it. It was a plane, and I believe you said based off of the style, it was either like or probably was a reconnaissance plane. And so it was a dual prop plane, one with one prop right on the back of the cab and the other on the nose of the plane. And this was kind of hoisted up in the air over the exhibits on the first floor, and it was connected to a rope bridge. So you get to walk along a rope bridge, and 4 people could go inside there, and your kids could pretend to fly the plane while they're actually kind of floating in the air inside this museum. After that, we got down to more of the outdoorsy stuff, more of the, I guess, entertainment side of things, and that's going to be trail riding on bikes. So there was a pedal bike that was stationary, and there was a TV that would go, and the kids could just play with the bike. But then the ones that I thought were really cool was there was a UTV, like a 4x4, and then there was a snowmobile, and these were hooked up to simulations that were on the TV. And so you were watching live footage of someone trail riding through Michigan. Looked a lot like the Mackinac City area type, that part of Michigan, similar to like Tunnel of Trees and all that. And so it's riding through there, but the ATV and the snowmobile are actually hooked up to motors inside the floor. And so it's pressing suspension and shaking the cab and making it move like you're actually driving down all these dirt trails. And it was so cool. The kids loved it so much. And it's just something that we hadn't got to see before. And there were 2 other exhibits that I thought were really cool. The first one was part of the underwater, and it actually was a fishing exhibit, and these kids went and sat in a small boat with a troll motor, and they had fishing poles, and the lines were hooked up to motors in the wall. And again, it was a simulation on the TV. And so as the fish was fighting you, it would try and pull the entire rod out of their hands, and it would tighten up, and you'd have more tension on the reel. It was very involved. And the second of the 2 was on the 3rd floor. There was a bald eagle exhibit, and you got to go up there, read about bald eagles. You got to see like a taxidermied one in a glass case, and then there was a place for you to stand with the motion tracking cameras, and they had like a 6-panel screen where you were a bald eagle flying through the city of Detroit, and you got to move your wings and flap them and kind of fly around as you wanted.
I saw the video that Melissa posted, and it looked like a cool place. I think I saw part of that where you and JJ were standing there doing the wing thing,
Yeah,
and tipping your wings and stuff. How did you hear about that place? Because I didn't even know it was there.
Melissa heard about it, but I had seen it before. I either through Facebook or something else, and it was just like Michigan events for children. So
Okay.
the last year we went to Michigan Adventure, and we kind of had our own little cottage house and went on Lake Michigan and did all this stuff to get our boys more outdoorsy and more involved. And so since the weather's not quite nice enough, I had seen this, she had seen this, and we kind of get those things that pop up on our different social media news feeds just because we're in that mode, right? Like we have little kids, how cookies and all that work on the internet.
Yeah.
So everything and its brother that's related gets sent to us, and we just heard about it through social media. And when we looked it up, both of us were pretty stunned because there are very, very nice parts of Detroit, but
Oh yeah, for sure.
everyone has their
It's on the
idea.
rebound. It
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
but everyone has their idea, their
Yeah.
stereotype of what Detroit is. And when you
Yep.
see the outside of this building, it's got new windows and is very not dilapidated, but just unkept looking. But it's just because it's an old. It looks like
Right.
they redid the inside of an old factory building. when you walk in, it's immaculate. And so we saw it online and it almost seemed too good to be true. And even when we pulled up to the place, it's like, hey, are you sure we're supposed to be here? Because I mean, anyone who knows Detroit, we're sitting there on East Jefferson. We got the Coast Guard flying above our head, right next, like not just down the
You're on
road
the
from
Detroit
shipping docks.
River. Yeah.
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 You're right down from the shipping docks where it's like, this is industrial Detroit.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you pull up and you're like, oh boy. But then you walk inside and I'm not kidding. It couldn't have been any better. And they have employees everywhere in case your kids run off. I think I told you there's a big tree in the center that the kids can run up and go down slides. And JJ actually ran up to the top and we didn't know there was an exit. And it actually go like you climb out of the tree onto the rope bridge on the second floor. Now it's fully enclosed, so he's not at risk of falling, but all of a sudden your kid's on a different floor. And I look at one of the little warning signs on the tree that, I'm pretty certain nobody ever reads. And it just says, if your child goes up to the top, they will be asked to wait by one of our employees until their parent or legal guardian takes the elevator or stairs to the second floor. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. So I look up to the second floor and there's a guy standing there. He goes, you looking for somebody? And I go, yeah, my kid. And he goes, in a brown shirt. And I go, it's maroon. He goes, yeah, he's right here, but he won't listen to me. But he's staying up in the kitchen over here. And I was like, all right, I'll be right up. And they're very nice people. It was such a cool place, but it's also comforting to know that when they have something that allows the kids to explore, they have enough faculty there to make sure that your kid doesn't just disappear.
What did it cost?
Kids under 2 are free, and then it was like $3 for JJ and $5 for Melissa and I.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a bargain.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's not much at all.
That's a bargain. There are beautiful buildings in Detroit. You're right. I mean, people when they hear Detroit, they get this idea about Detroit.
It's got a stigma to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It just does. It just does, and it has for my entire life. It is on the rebound. They do have good leadership there, but there are beautiful, like the Detroit Institute of Arts is beautiful. The Fox Theater is magnificent. I mean,
across from that DNR place, there is a park that is, directly on the Detroit River, and there's a hill that has stairs that you can tell. I mean, they're well maintained stairs, but you can tell this is a stair you build when this place was a place to come see. It's like the stairways that you would see along the lakes, along Michigan's Great Lakes. Those type of walkways are built in this park, and you can just tell, especially like sunset or nice time of day, that at one point in time that Detroit was a magical mecca. It really was.
Sure.
And it was just because of the over industrialization, it took its downfall, but you can tell they're also trying to restore it again.
Well, I know, and Detroit is still a big city. It's a lot less than it used to be because of, people moving to the suburbs, because of the unsavory elements that
I think some of that's cluster housing too. I was talking to Melissa while we were driving through. You see a lot of those dilapidated industrial buildings, and I know you have to worry about asbestos and all that stuff, but there are so many times where you could have cheap, affordable housing, but because it's zoned commercial inside of a city and they refuse to change the zoning, you can't have housing there. And they could do so much with that. And I really just feel like it's a missed opportunity. I'm sure there's people much smarter than me that have thought about it or worked on it, but
it's changing though, Jared, because there are a lot of more young people moving back into the city.
That's good.
That is changing. I remember, again, and Detroit's had, national publicity over its leadership. I mean, Kwame Kilpatrick.
Yeah.
I think Dave Bing was a really good guy and he wanted to do well for the city. I don't know how much he did, but I do remember at some point in time, and I believe it was when Dave Bing was the mayor, that there were like 16,000 abandoned houses in the city of Detroit that were just, vacant, empty, rundown houses, And the last I knew, and I'm sure the number is less, that was down to 2,000. Between, I think Dave Bing got it started, but then when Mike Duggan, I believe, was elected mayor, and I know that was one of his, just cleaning up the city.
Well, they were
And
doing that. I think it was Obama administration when we had the housing crisis, and one of my college professors, he bought his home down there for $8,000. Like they were incentivizing people with insanely cheap property just to get people to come back to build up the community.
and it's nice to see. We did that. I can't even remember the name of it when I worked at Levy, where we went downtown, a group of Levy volunteers, and they provided lawnmowers and weed whackers and even a couple chainsaws. And on these vacant lots or on these overgrown lots where the house was overtaken by, and people weren't living there, we cleaned up the lots. And we worked down there for a day. They gave us lunch. Um, it was Live Detroit or Life Detroit, but there were like on that day there were 12,000 volunteers. I remember, obviously only 20 or 30 from Levy, but the company was involved, and it's nice to see because you're right. There are jewels that have lived through all that bad time that are still jewels in the city, and it really is coming back.
I mean, the Fox Theater, when we went there for Cocomelon, I know we talked about that on the podcast. That the Fox Theater is just a fantastic place. It has so much style and tradition, and it like you.
It's a beautiful
even
place.
as a non-Detroiter, it's like you feel proud that it's part of your city.
People take tours of the Fox just to not even to see a show, just to view the theater because it's got all these ornate carvings and you know opera lamps, and it really is a cool place. Your mom and I saw the Beatles tribute band Rain, and they were fantastic. But that I
And
hadn't been
the
to the
manual
Fox.
elevators, I love those.
Yes, I hadn't been to the Fox in like 20 years, and
Seats didn't get any bigger.
no, but it was okay because this was just after COVID and it wasn't crowded. You had to wear masks going in, but when you got to your seat, if you were sitting far enough away, you didn't have to wear a mask. But so COVID was just ending, but and there are a lot of jewels in the city that are like that. And it you're right. It was a very proud blue collar city at one time, and I really think it's coming back, and that makes me feel good. Even though I've never lived there, I did have to do some work there. A company I worked for was based out of there and had a lot of operations there for a lot of my career. And I'm glad that it's coming back. But that video of you guys at the place that you just went to, at the museum you just went to, if you could post that, that's worth seeing
Yeah,
because it's
absolutely.
short and it gives people an idea of what you can see. And again, $5. And that's and the kids, I'm assuming the boys had a great time.
Oh, they had a riot. I mean, that is that's the biggest thing for me is when you go to a place like that, it's all the little stuff. The stairs aren't too far apart for little kids to go up and down. The railings, there's an extra lower railing going up and down the stairs, but everything in the museum is hands-on. And if there's a section that's not meant to be hands-on, not only are there multiple signs, but it's usually like the big tree in the center. They didn't want you climbing on the roots, so they made sure that they tucked them in the back corners so kids weren't enticed to do it. So they could climb all over the rest of that tree and have so much fun and just making it to where they don't have to be bored watching, but you're allowing them to engage. I mean, obviously, I'm a hands-on learner. I think a lot of people are. That to me is where the magic happens because they're learning, but they're having fun at the same time.
No, that's cool. That's cool, and it looked like you guys had fun. And again, it makes me feel good because you know it for years, for my whole life, when I would travel to a place where there were people from other states that came and they go, well, where do you live? And I'd say, well, I'm about 50 miles west of Detroit. And when you'd say Detroit, they'd go, oh, and
Yeah.
it's like, and it's not like that. I mean,
No, I think it gets a lot of bad publicity, not just because of how industrial it is, but I think you also have the cross-border bias. So I mean, we all, everybody's got their own stereotypes, and that's the same with Canadians and them being nice, but also not necessarily having the greatest filter. And
that's
so,
fair.
and that's not meant to be offensive. That's just meant to be honest. So it's like when you've got someone, which so many people do this, they cross the border from Canada to Detroit to work.
Right.
It's like, well, when you went from your residential suburb into the industrial part of Detroit, not the built up city, it really does look like a shithole. And so I think when that stigma just keeps being reinforced to people who don't see the other side, I do think that's how word can really spread and help build a reputation because, I mean, Toronto and everything else, they're very assimilated with the United States. So their opinion, their sports teams, all of that has influence throughout the US. And I think that kind of spreads it. I remember people having that reaction that you're talking about when you say it's near Detroit. And it's like, man, everybody wants to go visit Chicago, and for a long time that was the murder capital of the world. Detroit
Well,
wasn't.
Detroit was too for a while, and
Well,
then it
but
then
not
it was.
during Chicago's reign, is what I
No, no,
mean.
no. No, I know exactly what you mean, but Detroit was known as that. Houston was known as that. Um, and I don't know where Detroit is now, but it's not the murder capital anymore. And no, it's just a feel good thing, and it's a pride thing because I was born, and I'm a country guy, man. I mean, I don't have an attachment to Detroit other than the sports teams that I continue to stay loyal to because there are teams.
But the pride
And
of Detroit is something that you feel, even if
oh
you're
yeah,
not
yeah,
from
I
there.
don't
Like
want
it's
us to
real.
be I don't want us to be looked at in a negative way, and I'm really happy that a lot of that, and you can see it, and anybody who looks can see it. A lot of that is changing. There's still a lot of work to do, but a lot of that is changing, and it's not. Even though I'm really glad the Pistons are back in downtown at Little Caesars with the Wings, and the Wings I don't think will ever leave, and they never should. That's a good thing. Comerica Park's there, Ford Field's there. They're and those I know those are stadiums and athletic fields, and that's different. But
But
at the
they're
same
surrounded by businesses and
yeah,
actually well-maintained parking
and
structures.
then there's these old jewels, there's these jewels that like the Fox and like the place you just went to.
And
What's
you've
it
got the old
called?
Catholic churches, and
Yeah,
it's the DNR Community Center, I believe, is what it's called.
okay.
I'll
No,
have to take a look
that
for.
look that just looked really, really cool. But we had talked about an assignment of watching a movie to talk about this week.
It's called the DNR Outdoor Adventure Center.
There you go. DNR Outdoor Adventure Center. That's good. That's good. And it looked like a ton of fun. But at any rate, we had talked about a movie to review this week, and you had watched it and I hadn't. So your mom and I watched Ambulance with, I always get his name wrong. Is it Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I like him. I mean, I've seen him in movies that I like. Okay, you had said there's a lot of action sequences, and man, there were. God. The one thing, the negative, start out with the negatives first for me. I thought it was a little long.
It
I,
was.
I thought they could have done without one or two of the wild car chases. There were some great driving stunts in that movie. Aside from special effects, there were some great driving stunts in that movie, and there was a lot of action in it. My favorite part of that movie was Jake Gyllenhaal's character, in that, in the midst of being in the middle of this bank heist, which was so elaborately planned and went haywire right away. Things went wrong that complicated things. And he had, looped his adopted brother into helping him, which his adopted brother was desperate for money, and he was a war hero, but he obviously struggled finding work. He had a wife and a kid, and he needed money for medical expenses. So he talked him into going with him or being part of it. And but my favorite part of it was in the midst of this chaos, while shots are being fired and tires are being squealed, Jake Gyllenhaal would look at his brother and say, "Remember when Dad took us to this?"
Yeah.
Like something
Yes.
totally off the wall, and like really calm, and he'd be smiling, and you could tell he was like really feeling it, or
Yeah.
he was
Reminds me
acting.
of good times. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you know, and they got in an argument, and they actually were exchanging blows, and then I can't remember what, he got tired, I guess, and his brother was driving, and driving the ambulance, and he got tired, and he just kind of said, "Okay, I gotta stop."
Yeah.
And they stopped. And then, when they switch driving positions and they're still involved in this chase, and his brother's been driving this ambulance faster than it should go, and they switch places, so Jake Gyllenhaal is driving, and he's telling him to slow down because they're trying to treat the hurt officer in the back and keep the thing steady. And he's
Yes.
like slowing down to like 20 with all these cop
Yeah.
race goes, and he's like, "This has got to be the slowest police chase in history."
Yes. The intense comedy in that movie was great. But Jake Gyllenhaal's character, one of the things that I enjoyed most about that movie was he's not quite a psychopath. He's definitely pathological, right?
Yeah.
There's a disease, a disorder, something. But in these moments of crisis where he's doing something absolutely insane or acting totally calm during an insane situation, he does have these moments of empathy, which psychopaths lack.
Y-
So he's right on the edge, and you can tell that he's one of those people that it's like, if you had this go this way in your life, or you had this parent, or whatever the case is, he was the guy on the fence that was going to teeter one way or the other. And he's trying not to fall off the bad side because he wants his brother to be proud of him. But at the
You know,
same time, he's got that issue where it's just like he's a bad guy.
and he would, just those things that he would do, like when they went in initially and they're like, "Everybody down on the floor." I said, "Everybody down on the effing floor." And then he'd walk up to one of the tellers or whatever that seemed really nervous, and he's going, and really politely, he'd say, "Everything's going to be okay. We're not going to
Yeah.
hurt anybody."
We're not going to shoot
And
anybody.
you know,
Yeah.
in this really calm voice. So his acting in that,
Like he
I
had
thought,
that lying and then the snap moment too, where it's like, why do we have these guns? And he's like, oh, they're just there for, in case. And then it's like something happens. He's like, this is why we have those guns. Like he just he
Yeah,
has that snap.
his acting in that character in the movie was really good. My biggest grievance was is that, and it wasn't. It was still watchable. It was still watchable. I just thought it was a little bit long, and I certainly some creative editing could have made it much shorter. There were a lot of cool things in the movie, the car chases included, but there were just, I mean, the whole movie almost was a car chase, and or an ambulance chase. But no, it was watchable. I mean, if it on a 4-star rating, I'd like go above 2. I'd like say 2.5. And the only reason wouldn't give it a 3 is because I thought it was a little bit long. But
For me, it
we
was just
watched it.
long-winded in the dilemma. Like when two parties in a scene disagree, they wanted to show every moment of disagreement as if it were real life. And I know there's a lot of action, all that, and I'm not saying put more action in. I'm saying they could have trimmed down that movie by 20 or 30 minutes simply by not having as much like forced dialogue with the long awkward pauses and the moments of strained thinking where the room's quiet, and because it wasn't,
That's fair.
this isn't a suspense movie. You weren't trying to
No,
build the momentum, right? So we were
no.
halting the action for thought, and it didn't fit the movie as well as I think maybe the director or whoever thought it did. At
Right.
least that's what I took away from it, because when you're not building that up, I don't need the long-winded, drawn-out moral dilemma. It's like, okay, we understand the character, we understand the dilemma, and he has these moments of comedic relief to give us a break from the action. But don't you're the reason I would think whether it was suspense or thriller was almost the direction they wanted to go with it, but the movie just isn't that, was because some of that slowdown was to try and show you how tormented Jake Gyllenhaal was and
Yes.
how
No,
bad his brother felt.
they were trying to expand that character for sure. One
Yeah.
of the things that I you had mentioned this prior to me watching it, and you were 100% right about this. You start to feel sorry for the bad guys. You do.
Yeah.
I mean, you start to feel for them. I mean, his brother was a part of that, and he knew what it was. He knew what he knew the potential of the violence, but he also knew what they were doing. They were stealing. That was their goal, was to steal, what was it, 16 million bucks.
Something like
Uh,
that. Yeah.
and but you end up feeling sorry not only for his brother, but a little bit for him because of that the personality that they added to and the way they expanded his character. It got to be a little bit personal because of those things he'd say in the mid crisis. That's what it
And
was
you
for
could tell
me.
his childhood wrecked him.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And that was the part that, and that maybe that's a better way to lean into it. When I'm talking about he's not quite a psychopath, because he has empathy. His father was a criminal and a psychopath, and he was treated very poorly by his father, never living up to his father's standards and doing some shady things as a child. And it's one of those scenarios where you're realizing throughout the movie, and I think they did a good part in building his character this way, is you're realizing that like there is good inside of him. He is empathetic, but because he's been programmed such a certain way, his impulsive actions are so violent. He's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't necessarily want to be that guy. He just doesn't know how to stop it.
It was like I said, it was, to me it was worth watching. Um and I'm glad I watched it.
How much did
Um
them not reloading piss you off?
I was only on point about that because you had alerted me to that.
But
Otherwise,
it is bad.
otherwise I probably I may not have noticed.
How about throwing the guy out of the ambulance in the parking garage?
That was stupid.
They're so stupid.
That was stupid. And
It's like, well,
but
fuck
see,
me.
I mean, I was all over that. Now, I would have noticed that anyway. But the gun thing, I likely would have, unless you had alerted me to that, it would have probably been a flyby for me. But the throwing the guy out in the parking lot when they're running and when they want to run
Yeah.
and leaving him there, yes, I would have picked up on that, the stupidity of that. But again, things start to go haywire right away.
Right. How many mistakes do you make when shit goes sideways?
Yeah. And then you already got, like you said, shit sideways already. And then you leave this guy.
That's what I'm saying. Even if you blow his brains out, do it inside the back of the ambulance.
Right.
Like,
no, I mean,
you're running away and you're leaving not only a witness, but it's like, okay, if you stole someone's car, they might be able to tell you the make and model, but I would argue that 90% of adult drivers out there couldn't tell you their license plate.
right.
So you're going to have an opportunity to get away. But when you throw a paramedic on the ground, he is assigned to a very specific ambulance.
Right.
And by the way, you're a great big thing painted funny colors with flashing lights. Like, not so hard to find. It's just that type of bonehead play. And obviously that's what the movie's about, but there are some mistakes. It frustrated me when I first watched it. But as I've been able to look back at it since, like I talked to you about it and then you watched the movie, it does actually support the movie better than I thought it did because it shows Jake Gyllenhaal's impulsivity and bad decisions. And even his brother, who was essentially adopted by Jake Gyllenhaal's father, grew up with that same childhood of like the crazy shit. So it's like they do have the tendency to make poor decisions.
Right. No, it was, like I said, action packed. I just thought that it was just, I guess I'd call it, for lack of a better term, cuteness of the character of him, reverting back to his childhood or being polite in a time where, at a time like taking the time to be polite.
And I thought there was
that was entertaining.
I thought there was a lot of thought put into the female character as well, the paramedic in the ambulance.
Yeah.
Normally, when a female character is going to be that bitchy and aggressive in a movie, I'm like, okay, I don't think you're going to talk to a guy with a gun in your face like that. But in this movie, I actually liked her behavior because she was very shell-shocked from the moment. She was very nervous, shaky hands, struggling, but when she could just focus on the task at hand, she was able to get her shit together. However, by the end of the movie, she got to that fuck it point where it's like, oh, you know what? If you're going to shoot me, just fucking do it already.
Right.
And I can understand that because you could feel the tension building that she was getting fed up.
Well, she had a long enough time to get ready for it because it was a little long.
She was trapped in that ambulance for a while.
So my friend Woody has given us a homework assignment.
Okay.
He wants us to watch and talk about a movie called Coherence. It's I believe it's on Prime. And it's called Coherence. Now, it's supposed to be a thriller of sorts. I got into this when he told me because, his tastes are his own. And sometimes we match up, he and I, as far as taste, and many times we don't. And that's okay. But when he suggested this, I was looking up the movie yesterday, and I don't even know. I went to Wikipedia, and I mean, it gave a lengthy plot explanation. I mean, pages. talking about specific things within the movie. So if let's both try to watch that,
Yeah.
and
I
and we can talk about that next
just
week.
to show you how far out there Woody is. I googled Coherence movie, and the first thing that pops up, what was the point of Coherence, the movie? But
Well,
the answer to that, it says the movie wants to convey a strong message. There could be things that happen in our life that could turn ourselves in good or into good or bad people. So, I'm assuming this is going to follow a psychological point of view of essentially the butterfly effect and whether you become good or bad. But I don't
alternative universes in there. Okay, so
know. Oh
brace
boy.
yourself. Brace
Let's do
yourself.
it.
Colton, we love you, but god dang.
Yeah. I'm gonna come back looking like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
No, let's you know
That's a
what?
movie we need
But
to
this
talk
is
about
what it
too.
absolutely, and that's one of my all-time favorites. But you know what? This is what this is about, and this is good.
No,
This gives
I'll be interested in this, and it'll
this is
give me an
this gives
opportunity to watch a
both
movie I
a
may not.
chance to walk down a path that we might not otherwise walk down.
Right.
And it's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's a chance for personal growth.
Well, and if I wasn't giving him shit, it'd be because I didn't like him, right? I mean, that's just my
Yeah.
personality.
But okay, we had said that we wanted to talk a little bit about Big Ten expansion before we do the above or below 50 for this week.
Yes.
So USC and UCLA are joining the Big Ten in 2024.
Yes.
Texas and Oklahoma are joining the SEC, I believe, in 2024. I believe that's true for them as well. So these, certainly in football, and I think in basketball too, it's getting more and more that way, although you can't say it as much about basketball in college sports. But certainly in football, these are turning into two mega conferences.
Right.
I mean, they're the big two of the Power Five.
And I
With
think, but I wonder if that's the future. Is that what you're thinking? Like what they want to do towards college playoff and all that?
I really do. I really do. And you had said that the Big Ten is talking now about adding Washington and Oregon.
Yeah. So I've read a lot of articles about it, and that's what's in the rumor mill. And I don't think it'll be packaged into anything that's coming in 2024. But essentially, what I've read, it's just like how you said, Oklahoma going to the SEC. There are teams that are kind of joined at the hip for conferences, and
Right.
so like if you have USC, you got to have UCLA. They just kind of go hand in hand. But you also want to have the rivalries from Washington and Oregon. But Oregon's the team, at least in the Nike market and modern media market. Oregon's the team you want. Well, you're not going to take Oregon without Washington. So I
And you
mean,
know
there's
what?
these teams that are linked, and I heard the same thing about the SEC. Is that this might cause kind of a chain effect because you pull Oklahoma. Well, now Oak State is looking around, going, "Oh, okay."
Well,
And
yeah. I mean, the Pac-12 and the Big 12 are both being rated, and they have been, and
they should be.
they're both going to be rated even more. And and I think I'm with you about Oregon. I mean, I think other than that kind of marriage between USC and UCLA, I think Oregon might have been the plum of all of it.
Well, just for the media and the Nike.
Exactly.
I mean, you
But
cannot get that anywhere else.
I do think Washington's really solid, and it gives you not only a foothold, it gives you a major foothold
Well, in
in the
Washington
Pacific
versus Oregon is
Northwest.
a big game when both teams are decent,
Yeah,
and so
and
that's how
again,
I think they're joined.
and those teams, by and large, not always, but those teams, certainly in recent memory, are generally very competitive and competitive nationally. Not necessarily to the college football playoffs sometimes, but not necessarily. But
But
they're
you're
very competitive
if you
nationally.
were making two super conferences, this would be building up your mid to lower tier of those conferences. And if
Yeah.
you were looking to move, since we're in an era of changing rules, changing format, all of that, if you were looking to move the type of college football playoff into something you wanted to see between two conferences, being almost like an AFC NFC thing, um, you would be able to have your own side of the bracket build up. Whether I don't know if you do north, south, east, west, what you do, but on each conference, but you would be able to have your top four teams come in and play each other, have it play down to two, have those play each other to one, and whoever comes out of each conference plays for the national championship.
Well, and that leads us, that kind of thinking, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but that leads us into the above or below 50 for this week. What is your above or below 50 opinion about this statement? Major college conferences, or at least part of them, will secede from the NCAA and form their own governing body in the next 10 years. How do you feel about that above or below 50 and why?
Um, I'm going below 50. I'm going to say 45%. You know, I don't want to be the tweener, but really I think I'm at 49%. And it's for the simple fact that the NCAA is a ruling governing body that is under the influence of these major conferences, and it allows them to have a separation of powers, similar to like a government structure. It allows kind of like a checks and balances type of deal. And I think it would be something hard to get all of the programs to agree with and get those conferences to get a majority decision. Not to say that it can't be done. I just think it's going to take convincing. So, do I think it'll happen eventually? In the next 10 years, I don't. But the reason I put it so close to 50 is because although it's nice to have this separate governing body and to have an entity that people can go to when there's violations that's going to be unbiased because or hopefully unbiased because alma mater situations, whatever the case may be, money packages, all of that. Although that is very nice to have, I do think conferences with major TV deals like the SEC, the Big Ten, which are the two that we're talking about growing, I think they are one fuck up, one shitty moment from just going, I've had enough. And so that's why I put it so close is I don't think we're necessarily 100%. We're trending that direction, but I don't think quickly enough to do it in the next 10 years. However, just because even if they implemented it tomorrow, it probably wouldn't even happen until 2027 or whatever it is. You know how the delay is. But um, I just, they are making so much money and they have so much authority that the NCAA, in my opinion, is most of the time a doormat and the rest of the time a nuisance. That it's like, if I got to shake this shit off one more time, I'm just getting rid of the dog. Like,
Okay,
that's kind of how I think that they view the NCAA.
it's interesting. And this, people should know, this is totally unrehearsed. My answer to above or below 50 is 51.
Okay.
But it's only 51 because of the same reason you said. When you include the 10 years in there, because things move so slowly, like the NCAA may linger on, they may be around forever, and they may be around for another 25 years in the form of a governing body that's not really a governing body.
Well, that's my
Because,
thing. Are they going to become the queen, right? They're just a
well,
figurehead.
yeah, and I think that's where they're really headed. But again, will they go away? I don't know. That's why I say 51. You look at this. The transfer rules used to be different, very different. Up until 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. Like if you transferred, you had to set out a year to go to another school. That's why so few people transferred. I remember, now he might have not been the first to say it, but it was the first time I heard it. Jim Harbaugh said, he goes, I don't understand why we guys just can't transfer and be eligible in the next season. Well, again, I don't know that he was the first to say that, but pretty rapidly after it was the first time I heard it said of a big time college coach. It happened pretty quickly after that that's exactly what you could do. Around the same time, they're talking about paying players that, these athletes on scholarships because they legally can't have jobs, because that was another loophole that, you could wash the owners or of a car dealership's car for $1,000 a week, in examples like that. But
Right.
when that started being talked about, and then people started saying, like big time people started saying, well, they deserve a stipend. And then the Johnny Manziel thing, where he was signing autographs and got popped and for it, and then the NCAA backed off. Then all of a sudden we got the NIL thing, which basically makes it the Wild West as far as paying players. If you can align yourself with a contract, you're able to sell your name, image, and likeness for money. And as far as I know, I could be wrong, I don't know that there's any limit. The kid who committed to Florida, the quarterback, who later decommitted, was going to Florida because of a $13 million promise of an NIL deal. Now, supposedly, when it came down to signing day, that found out that those funds weren't going to be, it wasn't going to be that much money, and he decommitted and signed someplace else. To me, the NCAA, obviously, they're still a governing body, but money is power. And the Big Ten and the SEC, and especially now, adding Texas and Oklahoma, the two remaining plums of the Big 12, and with, the Big Ten adding USC and UCLA, and with talk of adding Washington and Oregon, money is power. And I think they've politely thumbed their nose at the NCAA for a while now. And I think if the NCAA continues to try and dig their feet in, that the Big Ten and the SEC, which will be the two most powerful conferences in the world, because guess what? Clemson and Florida State are next to go to the SEC.
Well, and when I look back at like the rules and all that, and you talk about like the transfer portal and the ineligibility, and then you talk about the NIL deals, I think the hesitation was that both would happen, right? Like when you open Pandora's box, it's open. There's no shutting it. It's open. And I think that I'm sure people who have considered the transfer rules and all that knew that once kids started to get to go wherever they wanted as soon as they wanted, that behind closed doors money was going to be influencing kids. So they were going to have to make it in front of open doors money. And we saw both of those changes happen immediately. I think with Texas in particular, we're going to get a sample of what happens when you have both of these, deals with the devil being done and you've got Texas oil money. But if you get Oregon in the Big Ten, how are you going to stop them and Nike from buying every best player in the Big Ten?
Well,
and I think that has always been the fear.
How are you going to stop them now?
Because they don't have. But my thing is that so that's the merger, though. I need to make that more
agree
clear. Though is when you're in the Pac-12 or the Big 12 and you have big money, you're still in the Pac-12 or Big 12. You go to Big Ten or SEC with SEC Network or Big Ten Network, and you now have Nike money inside the Big Ten. I don't know how you beat that. I don't know that you can keep it competitive.
I see your point, and I think it does.
You'd have to put a salary cap on
it
teams.
it increases their advantage. Well, see, that's where I think it's headed. That's where I think it's headed. Is that because if you're going to level a playing field, you have to put a cap on this, because otherwise, you know, I don't know how much
But I
Cade
mean, just make it
McNamara.
an allocated spending fund that's similar to a scholarship, but it's for name, image, likeness.
That's what they wanted to do. That supposedly that's what was initially proposed, and I don't know which side proposed it, whether it was the NCAA or whether it was coaches or what, or universities. But that supposedly is what was originally proposed, and then so we end up getting the NIL, which is the Wild West. Now, Cade McNamara, Michigan quarterback, won a Big Ten title, and then got beat out the next year. He transferred to Iowa. Supposedly, he had 2 or 3 NIL deals in place, through Iowa. Good for him. Smart by him. Supposedly, Eric All, who ended up transferring to Iowa as well from Michigan, he helped advise Eric All on how to procure some of these NIL deals. But like you said, if you don't do something to limit the playing field, then it's the Wild West. But going back to the question, it's interesting. You're at 49, I was at 51, but we're both hanging it on the fact that 10 years was included, because neither one of us feels very strong. I feel a little more
They're just
strongly
slow.
that it could happen than you do.
Yeah, they're just slow. But I mean, I think it's trending in that direction. And here would be my hope. Not only would there be a restriction on what the number could be for the NIL deal, but and maybe you make it player based, maybe you make it team based. I don't know. But the other thing to me, to stop the numbers from being, astronomical for high school kids and teenagers, instead of, it needs to be an allocated fund regulated, by the government, to the point where the money given or promised to the athlete isn't taxed like by state or federal tax, but instead there's a 50% cut that goes to notable charities in the United States. And that way you're going to have a limit on team funding. Maybe the kid's promised $2 million, but he gets $1 million instead of handing a 17-year-old $2 million or $10 million. And even if the number gets up to, even if you offer him $10 million, he only gets 5. And it's like, that's,
But okay.
And then you're making everyone win. You're supporting charities. The kids are getting paid. The schools are going to have, I guess, the somewhat of a balance, because there's a essential salary cap or whatever you want to call it.
Okay, but if you're gonna, just 2 things, and I mean, I'm thinking about this as you're saying things, and it's bringing thoughts into my head, which is good. There's 2 things that come to mind when you say that, and I'm not disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is, it just made me think about these things. Okay, before NIL, guys were getting paid, right? We know that. Guys were getting paid, and it was totally unregulated. The NIL basically gives you a right to keep track of it. If you put a cap on the NIL deals, then who's to say the guys, okay, if I'm going to college and I'm a sophomore and I'm getting $100,000 a year in an NIL deal, who's to say that I'm not getting 500?
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
it could be all hidden, like it was,
right?
like it was before. And if you go to the stipend thing, which I think is legit, you're going to have to keep that stipend low because
Right.
of Title IX. Because
So,
every scholarship athlete is
right.
going to be
I mean, Title
entitled to
IX
that.
needs to get thrown out the door. It
Well,
was a
I'm
dumb
just
thing
saying.
back in the day, and all it's done is make things worse.
Well, but
That's
again,
nothing against female sports, but by cutting out male sport, that's the thing nobody gets. Unless your program is phenomenal at making money, which a lot of them are, but not all of them, and I would argue that most colleges are not. It does not mean that that women get a team because get a team. It means that the men's team gets fucking cut because the school would lose money by having to get a girls' team.
I know there was talk of a $250 a month stipend. Well, I don't think that's enough. But again, there was talk of that because, again, Title IX, which is still in place,
Right.
you got to give that to every scholarship athlete.
And
There's just
and
pitfalls.
I
And there's
agree with you with the behind closed door shit. It's gonna happen if you
Sure it
put a
is.
cap on there. But again, the fear of keeping teams competitive, in my opinion, is more at risk now than it's ever been. And there's always been money behind closed doors. So by putting a cap on the NIL, by putting a maximum or minimum or whatever or both in place, people can still be caught and punished for behind closed doors transactions to try and make the conferences still competitive.
That's fair.
Because there's the risk of breaking the rules, you're going to have guys going, why would I piss it all away for $2 million more when I'm already getting 8?
And you know what? We're broad brushing every
Oh, for
athlete, and we
sure.
shouldn't, because there are
Some of them
some,
are financial advisors that are
yeah, and they're
phenomenal.
honest, and they're just
Yeah.
trying to make their best deal, and they're happy with their best deal,
But
and
you've
they're not,
got,
and they're
for every 10 good ones, you got one bad one in the batch
that's
that's going to make us look
and
at
that,
it.
but again, that's exactly right. So there's no quick solution. I just thought it was really interesting on the above or below that you were at 49, and before you said 49, I was at 51. And it's both basically for the same reasons that
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
think you can do it in the next 10
It's
years,
almost like
whatever
we
you
know
do.
each other.
Who knew?
Yeah.
So you had talked about, you had mentioned, I don't know, did you mention it on the air, the Allen in shit story? Did you mention
I
it on
believe
the
that I
air?
did. Yes.
I think you did. Okay, so to tell you the Allen in shit story, and I don't, this is one of those where I'm going to be really careful about how I describe this, and I'm certainly not going to mention names because this is a real situation with real people. Alan and I have had conversations over the years. And keep in mind, this is, we've been best buddies for more than 50 years, so we've had a few conversations. We had one this morning, in fact, before you and I came on the air. We talked for about an hour. But at
How
various
was the
times,
phone sex?
at various times your focus is on different things. A lot of times ours is about sports, and a lot of times about, the Lions, but the Detroit Lions. But anyway, we've talked over the years, and my answer to him was, because you see, everybody has looked at websites that are obscure. And I mean sexually obscure, sexually deviant websites where, you know, people like to be paddled on the butt, or, what, women sitting naked in a cake and
Think
farting.
of a more like minimal taboo paddled on the butt.
Well, I'm trying to
Nice
be delicate.
eggshells
I'm trying to be as delicate as I can here because this is a delicate topic.
paddled on the butt.
But anyway, the cake
Today's
farting, and
day and age, your grandmother would admit to
I know,
that.
I know, I know. But all I'm getting at by saying that is that to whatever extent you have people have a fetish. I mean, my answer to Alan is, and it's always been, and he would tell you this, It's like, dude, there's a club with a local chapter and regional officers of that society of
Yeah.
cake farting or whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever you've thought of, people
Yeah.
are doing it for
People
fun,
are
and there's
doing
a
it.
group that's
People are,
organized,
and a lot of people somewhere like doing it.
and they probably pay money to do
And
it.
exactly, whatever, whatever it is. Whether it comes from getting paddled on the butt to the most extreme thing you could think of, there are people out there that like it.
That was
And
adorable how innocent that was.
well, I was just trying to be as delicate as I could. So anyway, we went to school with this girl, and she was, she wasn't like overly popular, and I'm talking about high school. But she was pretty, and she always like was made up and like kind of glamorous, really. And she wasn't like part of our clique, because I think she was like one of those people that as they got into high school, they were more detached from school. Like she might have worked part-time when her last year or two, like did the co-op thing. And she wasn't like, you didn't see her at basketball games and football games and things like that. But she was a pretty girl, and she always wore lots of makeup and always wore the latest fashion and all that. Well, Alan was, we both knew this person. And Alan had a friend, a female friend, who knew her well. And probably 10 years after we had graduated high school, so this is somewhere in the early 80s, he starts telling me a story about this glamorous girl from our high school, that in the story he has heard from his close associate, who knows Alan well, but also knows this girl well. And she tells Alan that this glamorous girl likes to, during love making, likes to
It's so bad.
likes to be in the top position and and defecate on her partner while continuing the sexual act, while continuing in the act. And he's telling me this. And I mean, I'm just like, I'm sure my chin was on the floor, and he's telling me, and he acted like I didn't understand. And I mean, he's telling me in much more graphic terms than I've described it. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, rolling in it. And I'm going, and I'm just sitting there. And I think this story, I don't even think it happened on the phone. I think it happened in person. We were face to face, and he's telling me, and he's acting like I don't understand. He goes, rolling in it. And I'm still like aghast, I don't know what to say. And he goes, in shit.
In shit.
So, and I go,
got
dude,
it.
I get it.
I wonder why she wasn't popular in school. She is a little fucking detached.
Well, I never got to know her that well, and I'm
she
sure
was
he
busy
didn't
working
either.
co-op, all right. My God.
And I know neither one of us.
How do you
got
bring
to
that up to another? I'd like to shit on you.
Well,
And then somebody says, okay. Oh,
well, you better make sure you understood the request.
yeah, excuse me.
Yeah, you said
say?
what?
You want to do what?
Well,
oh my
okay,
God,
and
that's
there's a whole.
my favorite part though is if Alan were my buddy and he told me this story. not only would I be completely flabbergasted, but
Well,
it's like I don't even think my first question would be like, "What the fuck?" or "Why?" It would be, "Why are you sharing this with me?" Like you could have took that to your grave.
no, because he knew that I knew. No, he
Yeah,
knew
but
that
he.
I knew this girl, and even though neither one of
Oh,
us knew her well, she was always like
thank
glamorous
God.
and and
He still
dressed
had shit
nice
on
and
you.
all this stuff. And she would be, I'm not saying I don't know who I would suspect of performing such acts, but she wouldn't be in my top 5.
Can you imagine turning
No.
her down and telling your friends, like, dude, she wanted to
Well,
shit on
dude, how do you get ready for that? What do you have a burrito and stuff beforehand?
that's the question, right?
I,
But
I,
it's not just how do you get ready. How does she find out that she's into that?
I it must have
What
just
kind of
happened.
fucking dark
Okay,
hole did you grow up in?
Here's a scenario that and
Oh,
it just hypothetical. It just happened
oh.
one time. And then she liked it. Rolling in it. And
Yeah, but
shit.
if it just happened, it's not solid. There's no way
Well,
that just
dude,
comes
I
out.
don't know. We didn't we
I'm
didn't get
just
that.
saying. I'm just saying that makes it worse.
Well,
It's like
does
she's
it?
got bubble gut during sex. Just
Does it?
fucking drops a
Does it
deuce.
make it
I'm
worse
gonna
if it's not solid? Does it really? Then you got a
yeah,
speed bump.
are you kidding me? Oh god. At least you
Yeah.
could get away from it if
This
it was
podcast
solid.
has gone to hell in a handbasket,
Oh my
buddy.
goodness, that's amazing.
But to
Oh.
me, I mean, all of the real story, again,
But
I wasn't there. I'm assuming it's all true because this person knew her well and this person knew Alan well. And why would you make that up about
but I
somebody?
know that you both know her. But when I think of Alan and his reasoning for sharing things, it's not because you both know her in my head. It's because he's like, "Well, I can't fucking unhear this, so now you
Well,
gotta."
yeah, but that's fair. That's
It's like
fair.
when you show someone a nasty picture, you're like, "I can't unsee it either."
Yeah.
Oh
Well, yeah, he
god.
wanted to share his misery. But then to
Rolling in
think I didn't, after this graphic
yeah.
explanation, to think I didn't get what he meant.
I think that's what kills it though.
I mean,
That's what makes it so good is that even in telling you the story, he's so dumbfounded by the actions that he has to make sure
I
you're
get
on
it.
the same
It's like,
page.
dude, I
It's
got
two people rolling shit.
it. I mean, he tells me again graphically, and it's like enrolling in it. And then,
Oh,
as if I still didn't get it, he goes, in shit.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know, man. I
Yeah,
don't
that's
know.
when she says something like that, you stand up. We're done. We're done. I'm out.
Okay, here's the capper to that story. I went to do a presentation at a public hearing
Ooh,
in Michigan someplace. I'm not even going to isolate it. But,
probably a good idea.
and that was part of my job, right? Well, when you're doing the things that we were trying to do, at that time we were trying to put an asphalt plant in a particular location. And and people they're going to voice their opinion about it. They have every right to do that. So that's why they call it a public hearing.
Right.
Because the people that are closely attached to that proximity are notified that these people want to put an asphalt plant in. So everybody shows up, that lives close by where you want to put that asphalt plant. This is like 20 years after that. I was told the story. So I'm in my, no, maybe it wasn't 20 because I was in my 40s.
I'm sweating from laughing.
Well, wait till you hear this part. This is ironic. At the public hearing, that person was there
No.
who rolled in it.
Oh, no. You
And
just
her
point at him,
husband
hey, and
and
shit.
her husband was too.
Oh, oh, oh.
and he was like 20 years older than her.
Ooh,
And
kinky
they
baby daddy.
I kid you not, Bubba. You know, and you know I'm telling you the truth.
He's got money and he likes to get pooped.
I could not get that out of my mind with those people in that room. And I got a presentation to give. And
I
every
mean,
time I couldn't unsee it.
I mean, how's a person like that get married?
Dude,
It's like, hey, baby, got a shit. Quickie?
and they were and they were well to do. I mean, this guy had money.
Well,
This guy
duh.
had real
He's
no, this
probably
guy
got
had,
so much money, he fucked his way to the other side, so getting shit on's like fun for him now.
dude.
That's like Charlie Sheen type money, you know? It's like
Well,
you it got mundane. It was so easy. So now
whatever
you go on to the next adventure.
what
Two girls,
what
one cup.
what whatever deviant behavior is out there, and again, Alan will attest to this, and I've said this for 40 years. Whatever deviant behavior is out there, there's a group with a regional chapter and elected officers and everything. And with the internet, there's more of them.
Well, if she's not an officer, somebody's fucking up. Because, I mean, good on
She's
her.
a founding member.
For sure. I just,
That's true. Well, I don't know that it's true,
I
but
don't get.
the story is true. That's what he
The
told me.
initial interaction has to be one of the best, like, fly on the wall moments of mankind. Whether she finds a guy who asks her to do it, or she has to do it to a guy.
Will you do that?
Yeah. Can I shit on you? No.
God. Jeez. So anyway, that
Yeah, I'll live without power. Keep me away from society. I don't like these people.
I got my generator.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
No,
good.
just the amazing thing is that I'm as appalled at hearing this as you were the first time you heard it.
But the best part is
No.
you led into this with paddling.
I was trying to be delicate.
Yeah, delicate all the way to taking a shit on somebody.
Well, to the imagination. I'm not going to suggest things. But the craziest part of it was to me is that, I mean, I'm taken aback by this news.
Yeah.
And because I'm not saying anything, he thinks I'm not understanding. And it's like, dude, I get it. I know what you're talking about. I just didn't know what to say.
Yeah. It's like those moments where you pause and people can see you trying to, like, you know, the wheels turning, or you're trying to piece the puzzle together. But it's like in this case, you're just like, how do I unhear this? Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm literally
in my life, and now it's out there.
I'm speechless, and he thinks I'm not following it. As if, and again, he told the story much more graphically than I did.
We might have to get him to retell it one of these times.
Well, yeah, you're gonna have to have your dump button ready.
Oh man, I mean,
anyway,
that's a new,
yeah,
that's
a new low. Sorry about that, but you brought it up.
Our low, I think we're doing better than her. We talked.
You brought it up.
Did it?
But again, that's and it's one of those sayings. It's like, did you just call me a bitch? Like we talked about last week. It's like it's like that. It's like when somebody says something like in it. Any one of you guys, any one of you boys would say, in shit.
Yeah, like you'd be like, and I'm sitting there in traffic, just stuck in it, and somebody go, in shit.
In shit.
I think that should become a podcast saying for us is in ship. We should get some T-shirts made or something. Just kind of like It Happens from Forrest Gump, but we'll
Dude.
get in.
Well, so that's my Alan story for the week. That's going to be a hard topper.
I mean,
I know.
it's a goodie. It's a you can't beat it. I can tell you, I don't know anybody who's told me they've done that.
Well, he didn't do it.
That's a unique individual.
Well, I think it was one of those things that when his friend heard it, she was so shocked that she had to tell somebody too.
Juicy rumor, you have to share it. Yeah, you can't keep it boxed up.
I mean,
Well, that's why we're telling it on here. You and I have heard the story a million times, but you gotta throw it out there.
At any rate, that's my Ellen story.
That was
I'm sticking to it. In shit to shit.
Stay fresh cheese bags.
Stay fresh cheese bags.
That should be your outgoing line. Oh man. Well, on that note, buddy. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode and the taboo that was involved.
Sorry.
But if you like this content, please leave us a like, download on Spotify, Apple iTunes, Amazon, Google Podcasts, whatever the case is. Please share the content if you like it and you have any friends that may be interested. We are hoping to continue to grow and expand. We appreciate everyone coming back and listening to us and any feedback that we get. I know one of the things was about video. We are continuously trying to see how we can figure that out and what types of editing we would need to do, as in we're not in the same location currently. So we have to make sure our signal strength is there as well as we don't lose any feed. But on that note, we do appreciate your guys' comments. Please continue to give us feedback, topics, all that. Woody, we appreciate the movie topic and appreciate you reaching out for that. But to everyone else and all involved, be safe, be smart, make good choices, and peace out. Love you, Dad.
Love you too, buddy.
Bye. Bye.